In this video, we are going to be talking about the Action Bar. Now, the Action Bar is a UI widget that was introduced in Android 3, and it's become a very, very common sort of navigation paradigm within Android. In fact, you guys have seen an example of the Action Bar widget probably in most every Android application you may have used. So instead of explaining what you can do with it, I just want to go ahead and show you 3 examples of the Action Bar in use so you can get a feel for what you use it for and what it can do. And it's really important to understand this particular UI widget because it is going to be a very recommended practice to use it in your applications in order to give you a consistent navigation look and feel. Before I show you guys the Action Bar, I want to point out one little thing. We are not going to be using the Action Bar in the actual app. I know that sounds funny to say. It's like it's this awesome thing that we should always use, but it's been superseded by something else called the Toolbar in Android 5. Now, fortunately, there's a backwards compatibility library that we'll be able to use, so technically we're going to be using the Toolbar, but everything that we learn about the Action Bar in this video and the next one will be applicable to the Toolbar. So if you're looking at this video and you've already heard of the Toolbar and be like, why are we learning the Action Bar when there's the Toolbar out there? Well, the reason is everything I'm going to show you guys is going to apply not only to the Action Bar but also to the Toolbar. I just want to show you guys it in the Action Bar because it's a little bit easier to do that stuff than have to worry about a separate component. Either way, let's go ahead and take a look at exactly what the Action Bar is and what it can do. So the first example is I'm just going to open up the default messaging app. And in this app, we actually see an example of pretty much the simplest form of the Action Bar that we can get. And that is here at the top, we have an icon and a title. So we see the icon and the title and this black background. This is an Action Bar. Now, it might not look very action-y because there aren't any things we can do with it, but it's an Action Bar nonetheless. So that is an Action Bar, it has an icon, it has a title. If you've ever seen those two things up there, that is an Action Bar. But there's a lot more it can do. For example, an Action Bar is also a navigation paradigm. So if I go ahead and open up the new message button, or click the new message button and open the new message screen, you'll notice that the Action Bar has gotten a whole lot interesting. See, now, not only do we have this little chevron right here on the left-hand side, which is weird, we also have these 2 buttons on the right-hand side. So let's take a look at these buttons first. We have an action button right here, which is simply an icon. And if we hover over it, hover quote-unquote, by holding it down, we see that it comes up and says the word attached. So if I click on it, it is a button, and that's pretty cool. So we get an idea that we can put buttons on action bars, just like toolbars in Windows. But I want to refrain from calling action bars toolbars because action bars aren't toolbars. Toolbars are a more advanced version than action bars. So anyway, the point is it's a very common UI paradigm. Another thing we have here is the overflow menu. So we click on those 3 little dots, a very common icon, and we get the icons or the actions that either were specifically put to be in this menu or couldn't fit based on the width of the device and the length of our text here. So this is the overflow menu. So like the add subject and the discard, those might be 2 things that if there was room on the Action Bar, you might want them to appear as icons. In fact, maybe on the tablet version of this app they do. However, things like settings, for example, is typically going to be something you'll always see in the overflow menu. So this is just a sort of little design guideline for you guys. When you're designing your own action bars, you'll generally want to put not very things that aren't used very often inside the overflow, so you're not cluttering up your action bar. So basically, I like to think of it as, is this an action that doesn't really necessarily have to do with the thing that I'm working on right now? Like add subject and discard, I think would be good things to put on the action bar if there was room. Settings, it seems kind of irrelevant to the new message and sort of ancillary meta sort of concern, so we would relegate it to the overflow menu. Other things would be like help and options, which is synonymous with settings, and fun stuff like that. Anyway, so that is the overflow menu. That is a button. However, there's another interesting thing about the Action Bar, and that is that little chevron icon. That indicates that this Action Bar, this whole thing, this chevron, this icon, and this title, is a button. See, I can click, and I'm holding down right now. I'm holding down my mouse cursor so you guys can see it highlight. So you see it's a button. And generally speaking, this button is going to do one or two things. It's either going to go up or it's going to go back. Now, we'll have a discussion about navigation hierarchies later, but the basic premise, well, actually, have you guys ever used Windows Explorer? So you navigate through your folders, and you can either hit up or back. Up will take you to the parent folder, regardless of regardless of how you got into that folder. Up will take you to the parent folder, whereas back will always take you to the folder that you were in previously. So this button up here can act as an up or a back button. Either way, it is a button, and we can click on it. And in this case, it acts as a up or a back button because both concepts would do the same thing. They would bring us back to the main page here. Anyway, that is an example of a action bar, a more complicated action bar. Let's look at a slightly more interesting action bar. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the stock calendar app. So here's the calendar app, and you see up here we have an action bar, and you noticed a couple things. First of all, it's styled. It looks different. That is definitely something you can do. You can style your action bars. Second of all, we have an overflow menu and a button, just like we did before. But over here, we have this interesting control. So it's not a button. Well, it is kind of a button, but it's not like the back button with the chevron. Instead, it has this little triangle doohickey on the lower right. What that indicates is that this is a spinner. And a spinner is a UI control, like a drop-down, basically. You click on the button, and a drop-down of items appears, and you're able to select one of those items. So in this case, we have a spinner in the action bar. So that shows you guys that you can really do a lot more than just put buttons on the action bar. If you want to get creative, you can do things like put up a spinner. So now we can select different things, like day or week or agenda. So when we work on the app, we will be taking a look at how to put together a spinner on the action bar. We're not going to do that in the next couple videos, but when we actually go and implement the app, we will take a look at how to do this exact thing, because I think it's a really cool technique and has a lot of uses. Anyway, so that is that example of an action bar. Let's look at a much more complex example of an action bar. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up the browser. And you'll notice we have an action bar up here. So what we have here is we have a button on the left, and this button allows us to get the page info, not too exciting. On the right, we have another button, one that shows all of our tabs, and also here's a second action bar, by the way. One that shows all of our tabs, and then we have our overflow menu, which is also super exciting. Not really, but anyway. But the more interesting thing about this is this guy in the middle. So if I click on this guy in the middle, it is an address bar. And when I click on it, the action bar changes. It changes to include a refresh button and an edit text, and the edit text is selected, and I can type in whatever I want. So I can say, oh, that's not even close to how you spell 3D Buzz. So I can say 3dbuzz.com, for example, and it'll go ahead and navigate to that page. And so that's an example of a more complex action bar that can do more things. And you can definitely customize them to meet whatever needs you have. Anyway, in the next video, we will take a look at some basic use cases with the action bar, how to use it, how to import it into our apps, and we also have a very interesting discussion about material theme. It'll be short, but very important. So we'll see you guys in the next video.